Hello, welcome to the London International Animation Festival Great British Takeoff series, where we quiz some of the most amazing animation studios in the world who happen to be based in the UK and find out about their past and their future. And I'm really delighted today to say we have Blue Zoo with us. Blue Zoo are the multi-Emmy and BAFTA award-winning studio, responsible for such hits as Numberblocks, Super Potato, Composy, and The Adventures of Paddington, as well as quality advertising and transforming brands into engaging worlds. So I'm delighted to say we have the three founders of Blue Zoo, and I'm going to ask them to introduce themselves. And I should explain right at the start now, Ollie Hyatt, who's the joint MD, is also going to be invisible most of the time because he's had a slight accident. I think the other two have beat up on him, but he's actually had a hockey accident. So his face is still recovering. So he'll be unusually sort of short in his answers. But let me ask you to introduce yourself, folks. Ollie, starting off with you.
Great. Pick on the one who can't talk first. Hi. I'm Ollie Hyatt. At Blue Zoo, I do most of the sort of new business. I also work alongside our digital and our licensing teams across a range of our properties. I hate to use the word 360 because it seems very old-fashioned now, but sort of the 360 approach to getting IP and properties sold around the world.
Thanks, Ollie. And if I can turn to Adam now.
Hi, I'm Adam Shaw. I'm obviously one of the co-founders of Blue Zoo as well. I look over all of our long form productions, so kind of series, specials, and features, and I creatively manage those with our teams.
Thank you. And finally, Tom.
I do the kind of what's left over from that. No, I do with the I exec our kind of short form team who do kind of commercials and short form social content. I also oversee all of our technology side of the company and also the culture, for example, implementing our B Corp program. So yeah, I've got lots of different hats in the studio.
Right, thank you very much, folks, and it's great to have three co-founders here to answer all these questions. So let's start, right from the kind of the genesis, the beginning, and I think it starts with Bournemouth University. Who wants to tell me about the genesis of Blue Zoo? How did it start?
Shall I start with this? Yeah, so like we all studied at Bournemouth Uni, all kind of graduating in the same year in 2000, and there was some ex-students came back and gave a talk, and they showed their work, and they'd started a company, a little commercial company. I don't know if they're still going now or not. Who knows? We got inspired by them and thought, if they're doing it, we could give this a good go. And they were living out, I think, a basement and working in their basement. And we thought, oh, yeah, why not try that? It was actually Ollie that had the, sort of instigated this, and sort of like he then kind of sort of wanted to form a team. So like he interviewed everyone on the course, and that's how me and Tom got involved. Yeah, so like fortunately he saw the benefits in having us working alongside of him, and that's how we started Blue Zoo at Bournemouth University back in 2000. Now the reason why we did that was because there was a big opportunity kind of at that time. There was a change in technology. Suddenly that you could get sort of Maya was like a third of the price, and you didn't need to use silicon graphics machines. So again, like the equipment was probably a quarter of the price it would have been before. So it was a great opportunity for us to use our skills and head out with high ambitions into a whole new world out there.
It was also, there was another window of opportunity, which was Freeview started in the UK. So suddenly an explosion of content needed. So we didn't really, we're kind of somewhat oblivious to that. So we went out and said, yeah, we'll start a company. We went to our degree show, and there was actually an exec from the BBC there. And I think they were looking for some students to do create some animations for one of their new channels. And the university pointed them our direction, said, hey, these guys are setting their own studio up. And we chatted to them, and we ended up making 200 episodes of a show called Blue Cow for their new channel CBeebies, which launched in 2002, I think. So we spent our first 2 years making content for that newly launched channel, and then for many more kind of broadcast channels that popped up. So it's really a beautiful kind of, by chance, a window of technology was suddenly available, with like just using kind of gaming graphics cards to create the animation on, and there was a huge demand, and we gave it a go. We had nothing to lose. So, and Ollie, like Adam said, Ollie was very savvy in the sense that he didn't just pick his mates. He kind of cherry picked the right mixture of skills, which I think is one of the main reasons that's led to our kind of success, having that mix of skills from the get-go.
Yeah, it was very kind of them to say that it was my concept, but pretty much by the point that we started, it was kind of like I can't remember how many people we'd interviewed, about 20, and they kept telling me that Adam was the best, and if Adam does it, then, you know, even in their interview, that if Adam will do it, then get as in like the creative and the doer. And then Tom was just so impressive with the fact, even while he was at uni, he'd set up his own little thing that he was doing anyway. And he understood technology in a way we didn't. And it pretty much came down, I think, for all of us, the fact that if we didn't get this group, and Adam and Tom could have walked into any job in the industry at the time, I probably couldn't have done then. But if we hadn't got this group, I don't think we'd have even started. I genuinely believe that.
So you're painting a great picture there of, you know, the time being right, and you as a sort of a bunch of like-minded people at university. I'm sure there'll be, you know, people listening to this who are universities now who are thinking about, you know, setting up on their own as well, like you did. But, you know, was your original plan, did you have a business plan, or were you very sort of like, you know, oh, let's just go out and do it? How tight were you around, you know, what you planned to do? Did you know exactly what your path was forward, or was it just, you know, a word out there? I mean, you talk about Blue Cow, Tom, but was that by chance or luck, or did you sort of aim for that kind of work? How rigorous were you with your business plan?
I think we went down the pub and put some numbers together on a sheet, which basically just worked out how much money we needed to bring in to break even, and that was our business plan, I think. So it was like, it wasn't very advanced, but we did actually we for a friend of a friend, we got some money to buy some initial equipment, and gave us a kind of like underwrote our overdraft. So we had, you know, a little bit of money to see us through that first year. But after that first year, I think we were kind of entirely self-sufficient. So having a friend with some money lying around helped, you know, give us that little bit of seed to grow from.
Well, it was incredibly fortuitous that this BBC producer came along to the degree show and asked the lecturer, you know, could the course kind of, you know, sort of create these animations? Well, we can't really, the licenses won't allow us, and also, you know, sort of, it doesn't really fit in with the curriculum of what we're doing. But speak to these young kids that have got their t-shirts on, their Blue Zoo t-shirts on, and yeah, so we just grasped the opportunity and kind of grew it from there, really. So we do anything and everything. I think we did spinny logos, websites, you know, kind of anything.
Yeah, we do anything just to pay the bills. But I think it was also, we had a fourth partner, Nick, who emigrated to Australia after a couple of years because her boyfriend's visa ran out. So she left off after a few years, but she was part of the marketing part of it, which I think a lot of people don't quite put enough emphasis on how critical the marketing side is when growing a new business. And that's 100,000 times more important these days when it's such a noisy world. So back when we started, we were just duplicating VHS tapes all day, because this was before internet video. So there was no YouTube or Vimeo to get our work out there. We just had to just copy showreels on VHS tapes of our student projects, post them out, and just cross our fingers. If we do enough, one of them will land on a desk just as someone's looking for a project. And that happened a few times where it's just pot luck. And I think that's really showed us that, you know, you can make your own luck if you put the work in and sow enough seeds. The work's not going to find you.
Ollie, you've got anything to add to that?
Yeah, just by that, I'm a big believer in you make your own luck. So, you know, the fact that we kind of had the ambition and the foresight to do it. I mean, meeting the BBC was obviously fortuitous, but it wasn't like they came in and said, oh, here's this job, you can just do it. We then had to pitch. We then had to go in and meet the BBC, and we had to get them to trust in, you know, some kids out of university to deliver a professional show for their brand new channel. It's their flagship magazine show for their brand new channel when CBeebies was coming out. So it's, yes, the meeting was lucky, and often these things are, but we had to like back that up. And again, we had to learn quickly from our mistakes. We made mistakes on that show. We made delivery mistakes. We had to work out the best way to do it. And I think that's the great thing about the team and the way we set up is we weren't battle hardened in the sort of baked in process many other studios had at the time, and the big VFX studios had, and we could be nimble and we could be dynamic and we could think our own way around things. So I think I do appreciate there's a luck element to it, but you have to be in the game and you have to make the most of that luck, which we did.
I think also, just to add to that, we've always kind of really embraced the kind of idea that if someone says, oh, that's just the way it's done, there's probably a better undiscovered way of working. And that's something we've always tried to kind of experiment away and iterate. And, you know, there's only one way of finding out if there's a better way of working, which is just trying it. So in that sense, I always say Blue Zoo kind of evolved on an island, because all the other animation studios pretty much started out of other animation studios, and then you've already kind of set in the standard working practices. So, you know, to this day, we always try and, you know, do experiments to see if they're a better way of working, because, you know, it's complacency that does kind of kill a lot of companies, and they get overtaken by the companies. And what I think the earliest example of that was when we got asked by the BBC to make all of these kind of episodes where we just had 4 PCs, no render farm. So it's like, well, how on earth are we going to make this show? So we ended up just doing kind of hardware rendering and basically screen capturing the whole show. So we didn't need a render farm. So it's basically doing kind of GPU rendering back in 2000 and making it all that way, and being creative, not just visually, but being creative technically as well.
The worst thing was I had to do all the voice guide tracks. So everybody had me in the room and they had to have my voice in their ears doing the voice guide tracks for about 2 years. I think that nearly killed us all.
Let's talk a bit about the difference between the year 2000 and now. How has the industry changed? What are the main differences now? If there's a company out, if there's a who wants to set up a company now, what's the difference? You mentioned, Adam, about, you know, technology had just changed. It was coming down in price. You didn't need silicon graphics anymore. And what were the other big changes between 2000 and now in terms of animation production?
It feels so much more global now. I think before, you know, especially our focus kind of was really UK based, and sort of like you know, like you'd have your typical linear broadcasters, and that was expanding to digital, like we said. But now, because of the ease of, you know, communication, that you're creating content that is global, and your clients are often, you know, like all over the world. And so that demand is kind of feels very, very different, where I think before it was only like your top creative studios that might bring in some sort of US work, where like I think now it's I think there's a lot more opportunity, but at the same time there's a hell of a lot more competition because you're against global competitors, and that as well is kind of tough because sort of like there's extremely creative, talented countries. There's other regions which have financial benefits. So there's a real, that's that's a big change. I think Tom.
But also, I think one of the Tom mentioned one of the key things earlier is when we set it up. Like certainly for me, all I had was a massive student loan debt. There was absolutely no risk. I think we all had girlfriends, but no wives, no mortgages, and no children. If you ask me now, the position we're in, I've got to put food on the table and clothe my children's back. Would you take that gamble against set an animation company? I suspect we'd all think a lot harder about it in the current position we're all in.
I think also there was back when we started, there was like just 5 TV channels plus all the new ones that were starting. So it was a very different world where to get a show off the ground, you had to know like one of 5 people who looked after the budgets of one of those channels, and all the money would just go on those 5 channels in terms of all the advertising money. But over the years, there's been more channels and more platforms. That same pot of money is now just distributed over hundreds or thousands of different platforms and networks, which means it's a lot harder to actually find how to get your kind of shows made because that money is kind of so distributed. And also there's a lot more people to try and chat to try and bring that money together. So it's just a lot more fragmented in every single sense of the word. And that's just seems to be actually increasing in speed as new platforms emerge, as audiences move away from TV channels onto social platforms. But then that does create opportunity where I think we're seeing much more of a move to creator-led content where it's all about the artistry that goes into work, which I think will just increase with the advent of AI as well. So I think the best talent will still rise to the top, and there are less gatekeepers from originally those days when there were just 5 channels. So I think it's really being clever about how you can leverage the positives from that and move away from the problems that solves. So it's constant kind of creative challenge. That's why I think you do need that kind of creative entrepreneurship that Ollie showed in those early days of how you can, from what some people see as a problem, you actually see it as a bit of a challenge.
Right, thanks. Let's talk about the present now, and something that you've just brought up, Tom, that idea, the notion of the audience, and how that's changed as well over the years. Because previously, year 2000, you probably weren't thinking too much of audiences; you were thinking of clients, etc. How much now do you have to think about audiences when you come up with IP or you come up with a project? And how do you find out about audiences?
Wow, that's like the $1 million question, I think. It's changing so fast. It has changed so fast, and it is changing really fast. I think you've got a duality of being able to be like hugely focused and do something that would have been considered too niche before. But that comes with a budget that is associated with niche content, usually, until maybe it can grow to mainstream. Or you can take the other view and say, I am going to be everywhere on everything, which then refers back to the issues Tom was saying about, well, if you're on everything and everywhere, who is funding that? Because no one's going to write you a £5 million check to be everywhere and everything. So it's a really interesting place. Now I would say, and I always. I have a love-hate relationship with them, I think, the BBC. I'm always like, we need a strong BBC. We need a strong BBC for children's content to help seed that money and seed the funding for these things so that we can go on and be everywhere and everything, especially on the public service side of things. So I can tell you now for a fact, we talk about our success on YouTube a lot with the block shows and how that those shows are globally via YouTube changing children's outcomes in education. Now, I can also tell you that those shows do not exist without the BBC. So the global success of those shows and the global public service benefit of those shows simply does not happen without the BBC. So I say the BBC do a great job in helping seed that children's content. I also say they need more money. The children's department needs more money. The BBC, I believe, needs more money, or it becomes sort of an irrelevance, or maybe slowly dies in the current mix of things. So I'd say for us, and I'm talking more generally than just Blue Zoo, the BBC are absolutely pivotal.
And you hear stories about parents putting their kids in front of something they've just dialed up from YouTube, something they've found, which may not be high quality, maybe just they've done a search and they're not so concerned about the quality. How do you ensure that your products get audiences? Adam, I don't know if you can answer that.
So how do we ensure that our products get the...
Yeah, how do you ensure that you're just not another channel on YouTube that what kind of research or stuff do you do to make sure that your quality animation, which it undeniably is put in front of the right audiences?
Well, so we're a B Corp company, so we're all about kind of giving a positive, having a positive outcome on, on people's lives. Sort of no matter how we, sort of engage or interact with them. Most importantly is that, that's our audience. So whatever content we're creating, we're wanting to, first of all, ensure that it has a positive effect. That's either through, largely within our work, that's through either through education or through entertainment, is through kind of bringing joy to them. So I think ensuring that our, sort of like what we're creating does that, but also being smart about it and understanding what children are looking for, what it is that they need, what it is that parents are looking for. And we do that through our digital services, through our digital department, which do all the analytics to ensure that we, we get the maximum reach that we can to give our shows the best, the best chance of being found, of being successful, of being kind of liked. And this is very much a newer way of doing things to like when we started, in which was, sort of like you'd get a commission to make a show because a commissioner liked the idea of it. Now it's kind of very much driven by will our audience, that's the children, the parents, will they come back and watch it again and again? Because if they don't, it's not going to be successful. So the choice is in their hands. And
that's where like the nuance of what is quality content for children comes in. So like Adam says, I don't think it's an and, I think it's you're either driven by the kids or you're driven by the parents sitting them in front of something. And I think the worrying thing for us is kids just like stuck in a loop of stuff that isn't healthy or left to their own devices. And it's like, how do you counter that? There's many, if you talk to Greg Childs and the Children's Media Foundation, there's talk of like trying to put in algorithms into YouTube to service public service content. There's all sorts of different things being talked about, but the worry is genuine in there. How do you get children in front of the right things and not the wrong things that's going to expand their experience and knowledge of the world in a positive way? And that goes from YouTube right through to the platforms that we all know they're on, but they're not meant to be on, the TikToks and the Snapchats and whatever is the flavor of the day. How do we get them to see the right content that's enriching their lives rather than the content we know we don't want them seeing? And that is going to be like, that's the $1 million question. We only do stuff for good, so they will only ever find our good stuff. But will we eventually get beaten by all the stuff that is just loud and brash and in your face that kids will click on? That's the $1 million question for us.
There's a danger of that just getting worse is when you are, on these platforms where you can see all the data, you are data driven and you can see what works, and then you can almost, my concern is then you can almost automate that to work out what is the maximum kind of what is that kind of like crack for kids kind of thing, in terms of what they visually just absolutely love. And obviously what they love is not always quite the same as what's healthy for them. So I think I think everyone's looking at the best way of resolving that, to make sure that you can trust what they're watching. And that's why we work closely with YouTube, because that's what they want from the platform as well. So it's like, how can we work together to make sure that the content that they're seeing, and because it's, it is hard for the parents to control what they're watching when the children can, click any thumbnail and watch what they want within, YouTube Kids, for example. So I think there needs to be a little bit of a multi-pronged approach to that.
It's also where are they watching it? So, like, for example, we know that the blocks programming is used in, like, I think over 93% of schools use it in some part of their education delivery. So we know we're picking up a lot of, the educators' time. So would or should public service content, should it fall under a remit of some sort of pseudo educational budget to find, because it's a money issue as much as anything else, because if you don't have the money to produce this content, kids won't see it. So there's a money and there's a discoverability, and they're the two things really. Who pays for it, and where do they see it, and how do we get them to see it? And we can't go back to the old days where they were forced to sit in front of one channel, but how do we make sure that at some point they're engaging with the good stuff as well as the fun, silly stuff? My kids love the fun, silly stuff as well. How do you get them in front of the good stuff? Maybe it is more to do with education and schools, and maybe prescribing blocks for homework. That's just a bit of fun. The kids like watching it anyway. I don't think anyone has come up with the right answer, and certainly what we can't do is just go down. Usually when there's a problem, the first thing you do is you just legislate against it. You try and get people fined or shut down. The fast food ban, that took something like £50 million out of the children's public service content environment. Did it make children any thinner? I'm not sure it did, but it really destroyed the market for ITV. So without just shutting things down, if you're going to shut things down, how do you build them back up? And where does the money come from? And where are children watching it? It's so important that somebody soon, a government soon, gets to grasp of that question, because we have failed as an industry and sort of independent channels and global providers to answer that question successfully.
Clearly part of the answer that you're with innovation in lots of different ways, and I'd like to cover two sorts of innovation. One being technology innovation, and the other being innovation in business. But let's just talk about technology. So, over the years, there's been new technologies come aboard. How do you keep on top of it? I mean, VR, real-time, AR. How do you ensure that you're experimenting and trying out these new technologies and making them work?
For us, it's always been a little bit of a mixture of making sure that we're investing in it, and also finding how you can kind of really encourage your teams to experiment, because you can't force creativity. You've got to kind of nurture it from the sides and kind of nudge people. So we've done that through kind of multiple ways. We've had our Bluesy Shorts program, which has always been encouraging different visually creative ideas, technically creative ideas, and giving opportunity to those who haven't kind of directed before. And that for example, back in '95, we did experiments with GPU rendering, which led to us being one of the first studios in the world to render entire TV series on graphics cards. And then also we've kind of really make sure that we have dedicated people to R&D in the studio. And again, that's not just technical R&D. We've got visual R&D budget, we've got narrative R&D budget, and technical R&D budget. So it's making sure that you are properly investing in and not just crossing your fingers and hope your teams will come across it. So, and then we all give them guidance on where our studio is going as to where the best use of that budget is and how they can work together. But it's, you know, which is critical in a fast moving world. You can get left behind very quickly. So, for example, one project that has been fun was doing being driven from the algorithmic challenges of YouTube of how we can create content differently. So that led to us developing our own kind of VR puppet show technology that we then used with our development team, developed an idea specifically for that. So it's not a third party saying, oh, can we shoehorn our idea into that technology because we want it made cheap. It's actually looking at what ideas kind of lean into the technology rather than trying to cram ideas into you know, other ways of working. So for us, it's about making sure that all these different experts in their own area can work together to answer a business problem kind of really creatively.
Also, like, it's kind of seeing where you know, so like when there's a problem or a bottleneck or challenge within the pipeline, and kind of addressing that so that it gives more power back to the creatives rather than forcing it through very technical routes. There was an example of that as back in the earlier, you know, so like we started off as a 3D animation studio, and we, you know, like we'd be doing like action shows in which you'd get these fantastic, really loose 2D storyboards. And then when you go to convert that into 3D animation, it was kind of like we couldn't achieve that same dynamism. And it was like we always kind of left, you know, it was eating into so much animation time just trying to get layouts that could kind of be comparable. So then we, you know, we developed some software which combined storyboarding with layout, with 3D layout. And so like this, giving the storyboarders power to be able to envisage the scenes kind of in 3D and sketch over the top. In which kind of transformed our, you know, sort of before it was like a really clunky transition from animatic to animation or layout, and now when we use this software, it runs so much smoother. Like we did that many years ago, but that's just kind of one of the instances when it's like, well, actually the technology is there, we can do that, and sort of now there's, you know, sort of like things are opening up more and more to revolutionize, really, you know, sort of what has been a very linear production pipeline. You've got to go from department to department kind of with these clean breaks, and, you know, kind of really see the way forward of them, you know, sort of being a lot more condensed production times, hopefully.
And Ollie, how do you see the technology having changed and the efficiencies that you've gained through innovation?
Well, look, I'm dyslexic, so unusual spell checks don't really help me out. So I think a lot of people have suddenly realized that the way I write emails, or more important emails, that sort of the tone and the general quality of them improved, because I can quite quickly run them through AI. You do have to do that health check that they still sound like you, but you know, it's always been a frustration of mine that a regular spell check doesn't help a dyslexic as much as you would think. And I can write, you know, I can write much more understandable, acceptable emails, especially if I'm, you know, doing something with the government, which I too often do. You know, they like things to be written properly, so I can create that much quicker. So for me, it sort of, I use it as a bit of like a personal assistant, really. But in terms of the industry in general, I think we use it as, or our department in terms of development, use it almost like just a fast iteration thing. It will very quickly do a kind of slightly better job, I think, than a Google search. So when we're looking for illustrated ideas, illustrated sort of design ideas, concepts, we can get a mood board together quickly with relevant imagery in a way that we'd have spent hours and hours and hours before. And then once we've got that, we can go to artists and give a much clearer brief. We can say, well, look, we like the shading on this, and this style of thing is more what I like. Now, you know, it's still at this point in time for me is better once you've got all that information to brief an illustrator, and they will come back with something that I always feel has more like heart and is more unique to your project, or at least at this point. Look, it gets better all the time, AI. So I'm not going to say never, never, but for me, it's the faster iterations, like Adam was saying on production, the slimming down of timelines to be able to reach a point you're happier earlier. And for us, it's just being vigilant about when things take over. And again, with the content overload on YouTube now, if you wait long enough on your YouTube feed, you get probably, I'd say, 3 out of 10 bits of content where it probably hasn't really touched a human hand. It's an AI edited compilation, or it's an AI voiceover over something that's already existed, or something completely AI, like balls of cookie dough turning into puppies, which people think are cute. So it's just being like vigilant about where it's pushed too far and has no real value by the fact it's had no human interaction.
Yeah, thanks. And just for the viewers or the listeners here, we will be getting onto AI shortly. So if you're wondering why I'm holding up on that at the moment, because it is a big topic. But I just wanted to follow up the business innovation idea, because I think you mentioned that it's very easy in a business to become staid and just do the same thing all the time, and you have to constantly innovate, as you've been saying. Can you tell us a bit about sort of how you do, I'm going to call it outreach, but how you create partnerships and find strategic alliances and things within the business world these days? Do you do a lot of work of sort of partnering with people?
Yeah, I jump in here. So like one of our most recently launched shows, Mojo Swap Tops, which we got commissioned with the BBC. Obviously, to get this funded, that it's like the only route was to kind of go down a co-pro route and kind of access funds from other countries as well. And we see this kind of really, especially because the changing landscape is super critical again. On Mojo Swap Tops, it's a 3-way co-pro between the UK, France, and Belgium. We saw the opportunity here in building a sort of like a truly Franco-Anglo kind of relationship and kind of company by setting up a Bluesoo studio in France back about a year and a half ago, in which we teamed up with a fantastic French animation producer over there and started up a studio in Lille, in which kind of really opens up their opportunities to be able to kind of not only access the fantastic talent in France, but also access to the French subsidies, the French distribution. And so like it seemed like a no-brainer for us, really, kind of all using the Bluesoo infrastructure. And so it's like working in one team. So there's not, sort of in most cases when you're doing co-pros, there's lots more additional costs involved, like there's extra management, there's like production fees, there's all the costs for the communication overlap, that type of thing. But on this, because everyone's basically working the same pipeline, the same infrastructure, we share supervisors and things like that. Even it makes a very, very smooth and seamless kind of cooperation. And then we had the third partner, which is Belgium. Again, kind of there was big benefits in accessing the tax shelter, and also because the broadcaster there was fully supportive. And then the company was sort of willing to be to invest in the property. So by going those 3 ways, we've actually managed to retain more of the rights on it, rather than maybe like, a couple of years ago, like you might have just kind of sold it to a streamer, but you lose all your rights.
I was going to say, I think the other thing is getting out there and reminding people you exist, because whenever we trace back where projects have come from, it always comes from one chance encounter that leads to another chance encounter. So it's not about going there and hiring a billboard with your name on it. It's about going and making human connections, because at the end of the day, all businesses are run by humans. So it's about human to human connections, and that's really where where the important bits come in. And that's what Ollie spends a lot of his time kind of talking to different people as well. We recently done a collaboration with a kind of a plush toy company, which is quite a creative way of working in terms of pushing our company forward, not just relying on the kind of legacy broadcast model for getting content off the ground, but looking at new ways of working and new business relationship structures.
Thank you. Thanks for that. Just wanted to move on. You mentioned already on B Corp. So let's talk about people and talent, because that's obviously been a core part of your being as well. This idea of how do you make people feel at home at Blue Zoo? You're in a competitive environment. There's talent move to lots of different places. So how do you get global talent, and how do you get the right skills, and how do you make sure people feel at home at Blue Zoo?
I think one of the main things is making sure you've got the right people with the right mindset on board, that ones that generally want to help each other, especially in a kind of almost remote first world. Having teams that can communicate well and that are looking after each other is absolutely essential. Otherwise, it can be a very lonely world out there. So our people and talent team do a great job in kind of leaving ego parks outside the studio and making sure that we have the people whose kind of like hearts are really in it to make the very best work possible. I think it's also about building trust, where we put so much effort into making sure that we're explaining what we're doing, so people understand it and they don't just think, oh, that's a dumb management decision, why they've done that. We spend an enormous amount of time kind of explaining our logic and allowing people to kind of ask questions. For example, last week or about 10 days ago, we did a kind of an Ask Us Anything question, where we had a kind of a town hall with all the company. I think we've got about 350 staff or something at the moment, and anyone was allowed to ask us a question. There was no filtering, there was no paraphrasing, and I think someone told me last week they're actually stumped as to why they, on their first day of the company, they joined and were on this kind of Ask Us Anything call, and they were a little bit perplexed why the management were reading out kind of critiques of themselves, of why they were reading out problems with that people have got with them, which they hadn't seen at a company before. And that is all absolutely critical to building up that trust, saying, look, we're just trying to run a company in a very tough environment, in a very fast moving environment with not that many levers we can pull, but we're explaining all the decisions we're making and why. And we find that leads to the best environment where people aren't kind of resenting choices being made, and everyone's really trying to just do the best possible within some very tough kind of circumstances at the moment in the industry.
Because it's not just artists that you employ. You need sort of IT, you need technical on the business and admin side too, right?
Yeah, I mean, animation is a team sport, not, like you say, not just kind of visually creative, but like I said before, technically creative, and making sure that all those teams are working together. Like I said, people and talent team do an amazing job at finding the right people, constantly juggling around who's going to work best in which role, because we find one of the most challenging things when we're running a company is we've usually got about 5 series on at a time, and trying to align them so everyone's got the right job to go on to once one project finishes and another project starts, whilst also giving people kind of career growth, making sure that they're regionally in the right place when it comes to a lot of our funding is regional, so people are required to be living in the right part. So the teams do an incredible job with juggling all of that whilst also trying to develop people's careers at the same time. So there's a lot flying around, and it takes everyone kind of working together to make sure that we are pushing forward. And B Corp does look a lot of that and flags up where we're failing. And I always say B Corp's more about highlighting where we can improve than kind of patting ourselves on the back about where we've done well.
Tom, I definitely think we should mention the IT teams and the finance teams, because the IT teams definitely, like, when you look at COVID, and the need to like suddenly have 450 people sat at home working. The work they did there was incredible, and the work they do keeping on top of pipelines and trying to make it as smooth as possible for people to work, that's super important and allows us to operate globally with people off site. And then the finance team, we always forget, they're the people that pay the wages, and they're also the people that, in this world where there is so much diversification and there's so many different revenue streams, have to sit and work out, from all like the 15 YouTube channels we run, through to the money we get from the audio, through to the toy stuff, through the different calculations for every license. They're the people who have to sit and work out every percentage that we get, and check that we can afford to do what we're doing. So it's gone beyond, like, when we started and it was me, Adam and Tom, and we all did a bit of everything, and we all helped do the accounts, and it's gone way beyond that now to like large dedicated teams. And it's the work ethic and the B Corp running through all of those things that kind of makes it work, not just through the animation pipeline.
Thank you for that. And maybe could you just, in a couple of sentences, mention what, for those who don't know, what B Corp is? Because you were the first animation company to attain that status, right?
So B Corp's an international standard, and unlike other kind of sustainability standards like living wage employer or kind of Albert sustainability for productions, B Corp looks at everything a company does. It kind of upturns every stone. So it looks at how well you run the company, how good your governance is to make sure it's all being run properly, to how well you treat your staff and workers, and measuring that. It looks at what your environmental footprint is. It looks at how well you interact with the community, which for us is the animation industry and kind of local community. And then it also looks at how well you get on with your kind of clients, which for us is our kind of our clients and our audiences. So it, across all of those different 5 categories, there's about 200 metrics that you have to measure, because, like I said, B Corp's is about improvement, and you can't improve if you don't know where you are now. So we're kind of constantly kind of surveying our studio, our clients, are measuring all sorts of different things, so we can see what that improvement is like, and where we haven't made as much improvement as we hoped, so we can really put more focus onto that. So then you go through, measure these 200 different metrics, and there's a non-profit called B Lab who then audits that, so you're externally assessed. So it's not like you can just say, yeah, we're doing a good job, we've got this initiative and this initiative. B Lab will decide if you're doing a good job and ask you to evidence it. So you can't just say you're doing it, and then they'll give you a score. And if you pass a certain threshold, you become B Corp-certified. And I think there's about 9,000 companies on the planet which have done it, of which 2,000 are in the UK. So the UK is really kind of punching it above its weight in that sense. And then you get reassessed every 3 years to make sure that you're doing what you said you're doing, and to make sure you're constantly improving. And then B Lab will also take it away if you're not doing a good job. Like they took it away for Brewdog because they felt they fell short of the standards. And to Havas, they took it away for, which is a media agency, because they had a big account with Shell, and they're like, you can't be a B Corp if half your revenues are coming from a fossil fuel company. So they are really on it to make sure that the B Corp holds itself accountable in that way, of making sure that to be a B Corp is a hard thing to do, and it's making sure that your focus is in the right place.
And it's a little bit about lots of stuff for us. So it's when we go to Annecy, some people have started taking the trains down now rather than flying, and I've made sure I used to go to every single event, all the ones in all the MIPs and the kid screens, and I just try and do do I need to do that? Can I do one less? Can we be a bit more ecological about how we do it? Are our servers working in the most green way we can get them to work? How are we treating our staff? How are we treating our audience? What are we giving our audience that's good for them? So it's a lot. I like to look at it as like a lot of little bits of good. It doesn't necessarily really fundamentally change, because I like to think we're all nice people anyway. But it's just like we say we are, now we're trying to prove we are. And I think that's a good thing.
And on top of that, it's making sure that all of our staff understand that. So I had an onboarding call with new staff this morning where I talked through exactly what Ollie's saying, and saying that everyone needs to do their small bit, because B Corp isn't just, the three of us saying, oh yeah, this is good, this is good. It's making sure that everyone understands in all the micro decisions they make every day, which is whether, if you pick a courier, making sure the courier is using carbon efficient modes of transportation. But everyone has hundreds of choices they make every single day, whether it comes down to whether to turn a light switch off and on as they leave a room. And progression is the hundreds of thousands of those tiny, small incremental gains, which lead to big societal gains. So yeah, Ollie's completely right in the sense that it's all those small things, but B Corp's a framework for trying to change a big problem into millions of little small things that then add up to one big change.
I think B Corp is helping you think about the future. And the question here about the future, can you tell us what's next for Blue Zoo? What are the current trends or sort of zeitgeist that you're looking at the moment? What's next for you? How do you see yourself developing in the next few years?
So
Who wants to answer that?
I'll jump in about an opportunity that that I'm really excited about. That like the government announced their close to 40% tax break for independent features under 15 million, and I think that's going to give quite a bit more opportunity to the UK for creating more independent features, as long as we can get additional investment to go with that. But it will help attract private equity and other forms of investment in there. So that's an area in which that we are pursuing currently, which I'm super excited.
I think just to add to that, I think there's hopefully will be a resurgence of kind of indie animation when it comes to features as well, because of that tax relief. But at the same time, alongside that, there's been a bit of a shift in attitudes of kind of theatrical animation, in the sense of execs have realized audiences are accepting of different styles, whether it's kind of Mitchell of the Machine style or Turtles film. We'd never have seen that a few years ago, where I think people had a very strict standard of what they expect audiences to pay to go to the cinema for, and that's now kind of gone out the window. So I hope the combination of that acceptance that audiences are up for going to the cinema to see all different styles of animation, combined with those tax reliefs for those indie films, will hopefully slightly shift where our industry at, and lead to kind of more indie film and indie animated films being made of all sorts of creative styles that investors are willing to take more risks on than they were a few years ago.
What about you? What's your vision for the future? How do you see the future of Blue Zoo?
Me?
No, Ollie, sorry. I
Oh,
think
sorry.
he's got his mic off.
Yeah, sorry. Yeah, future Blue Zoo. Well, again, like my side of it is sort of content development. It's really looking for opportunities everywhere. Maybe not thinking broadcast first, maybe some digital first stuff which we're playing with. Maybe even how do you do narrative and deliver animation in games platforms? So everyone talks about Roblox and those sort of platforms, super popular with children. But I think it's you can start thinking of an idea and getting that idea from anywhere, but then it's like, how do you take that seed of an idea and push it everywhere? It's such a big battle to win, but those that do it well, do win big. Because when people really want to spend money, they're still looking for that guaranteed success. And if you're on those platforms, they've all got such good data back ends. if you can go into someone and say, look, we are getting 1 billion impressions, which we are now with the blog, we're getting 1 billion impressions a month. It's very hard for someone to then turn around and say, oh, no, I'm not interested in that. You know, it really opens people's eyes. So we can be in all of these places at once. We can find the data. We can see what's working. And I think there's more opportunities than ever. I just think there's slightly less money to seed those ideas. So maybe there's a time and a place for investment. We know the government are thinking about setting up like creative banks and things like that. So I think there's going to be more risk, but possibly sort of more reward from all these different places you can be. And it's creating, and my job is to create the right content that works on all of those things. So it's tricky.
And, I did promise an AI question, and here it is. So, are you using generative AI, and what's your take on its effect on animation production and design in general? I know there's a lot of sort of uncertainty and fear at the moment about generative AI, but what's your take on its effect on animation production? Tom.
So like Ollie alluded to earlier, we're trying to take a bit of a kind of nuanced, pragmatic approach to it, and trying to be open-minded whilst also respecting rights holders. So we've kind of recently iterated our AI policy again as these are fast-moving times. That's something we hope to be able to put on our website very soon. But really what that is saying, look, there are multiple facets to this. For example, there's a big legal issue with using kind of unauthorized training data. So we don't have kind of generated Gen AI images in our productions. Firstly, because of a lot of clients will say that they won't allow that for a start because of the legal issue, but also we want artists to be making beautiful work, not pushing them out for a robot to do it. But at the same time, we've kind of like surveyed all of our staff and got their input on what they think that our approach should be to make sure that we're all aligned. And we have had some staff that say we should banish the words AI. I personally don't think that's the right approach, but we've had many artists who say they want to use AI. So we kind of like looked into that, and where we've come to is really allowing those artists to choose where they use it, as long as they stick within certain guidelines. So, for example, if someone's creating a background image and they need to kind of extend it, rather than painstakingly spending 6 hours doing a job they find tediously dull, they can use like Adobe Firefly generative AI to extend that background. And they're opting to do that to help their own artistic workflow, so they can focus their creative on other things, rather than us blanket saying no, AI equals bad. We want to see how we can use it to really push our human artistry in the best way possible in a very challenging business environment. I think our biggest concern is if other studios take a little bit less ethical approach and say, screw it, we're going all in, and then that makes it very hard for us to kind of compete. So we're trying to see how we can remain competitive, how we can allow our staff to make the right informed choices, and how we can use it in other ways as well. Like Ollie was saying, to help people who need who are asking for to use the right tools, whether they're dyslexic or anything else, how we can use it to help automate workflows. There are so many use cases around that are actually helping artists. It's not we're just making sure that we're doing it diligently and ethically. So we've spent a lot of time surveying different departments, see how they want to use it rather than how management think they should be using it. So for us, it's a big conversation, making sure that we're investing in experimenting with the tools, so we always stay up to date. We're not we're not in the dark about what the tools are capable of, so we can make the right decisions whether they're the right tools to use. So it's about staying informed in all senses of the word.
What I've just done for you now is I've asked AI to summarize that response for you, and it says by embracing AI and real-time technologies, Blue Zoo Animation Studio aims to push the boundaries of animation, delivering high-quality content while maintaining a focus on ethical considerations and the well-being of its artists, which is, I think a very good answer and the perfect use of AI.
I think also, I think from a strategic point of view, there's going to be so much AI generated dross where it's so easy to make content. You know, I really want Blue Zoo to be that kind of lighthouse in that sea of dross, because, you know, the best stories are ones that resonate in a soulful way. And that's something that will never change. And the best stories are the ones that really stand out and have that human collaboration that people go with their guts to make content that they'd really enjoy. And at the end of the day, that's what, you know, we do really well, and that will continue forever, I think.
But also creatively, there is a bit of a problem with AI. So when we've been iterating stuff in development or asking it, there is an inherent sort of, it only can work on the data sets that it's got. So depending on what you're using, you do quickly come round to sort of, I get a feeling you get quite an average delivery of stuff, or you have to work super hard to steer it away from being average. And I find it copes much better with trying to develop something more live action in feel for a film we were working on, and it kept delivering even no matter how much we told it the ethnicity of a character or where it's from, and it was a pirate-based thing. Invariably within 3 images it looked like a white person from Pirates of the Caribbean, right? And it was like, well, I can see where you're getting your data set from here, because this is literally, you know, you wouldn't look at person. And so there are issues about data sets, and there are issues about you are only looking backwards. You're not future gazing or anything like that. So I think until that problem is resolved, we still need that like human touch.
It's very good at doing an average job, but
yeah, it is.
We don't want an average job done. We want an exceptional job done.
And one of the things that concerns me is that, you know, young people who maybe aren't as educated in AI, this impression that there's no point going to study animation anymore because, you know, the robots will be taking the jobs, etc. So, and I know sort of Blue Zoo have been sort of exemplary over the years in being involved with education and the skills agenda, etc. So I've got one kind of last question for you here, and that is sort of, what advice have you got for young people who are looking to get into animation today, and how would you persuade them to take the plunge and not to worry about an AI automated future? So, you know, what advice would you give quickly, you know, in succinct chunks here, for young people who are looking to get into animation?
I'd say just experiment, because that's creating of new things that creates really kind of engaging entertainment, and that stuff AI isn't good at. So on that point, I guess it's about always experimenting. Also know how to use lots of tools to your advantage, because that's what we're seeing more and more of, is bringing different tools together to create kind of new and exciting things. And I see a lot of growth in that more kind of generalist role as well. So I think it's kind of staying creatively hungry and curious is the best way forward.
I'd say, like, you know, like, it will actually be putting more power in the hands of the creative, because then you can get your vision out, do you know what I mean, probably a little bit more smoothly than perhaps in the past, which takes a lot of processes. So I think it's staying true to understanding how to connect, how to communicate with people, how to tell stories, and making sure that the story you're telling is a worthwhile story to tell, really. Because I think, you know, there's lots of opportunity for AI to be able to assist with our processes, not to get bogged down by learning specific softwares and processes, because of that changes. Do you mean in our past 25 years that's changed? It's changed a lot, but it's going to change even more rapidly, you know, in the next few years.
I think also one thing I forgot to say is you can use these tools for your advantage in ways that wasn't possible before. For example, on TikTok, you know, it's so algorithmic. It just wants you to watch for as long as possible, and before the viewer gets bored, or, you know, before the viewer just finds it dull. So make TikTok content that work well, you've got to keep the viewer engaged in ways they don't think they might be. So, and get them to watch the end. And at the end of the day, that's just storytelling of how you can kind of like keep the viewer guessing, have twists and turns to get to the end in 6 seconds. Now, what's changed is you can get feedback immediately of where the viewers tuned out to the second to where viewers haven't watched it to the end and what's working. And before you might have gone to film school, spent a year making a film, to then shown it to work out what works and what doesn't work, which is a year-long iteration process. You now have a day-long iteration process where you can get that immediate feedback. So I'm really excited to see in the future where that takes future story makers, when they can learn at 300 times the speed of what makes really intriguing stories that are from human data, not machine data. And I think people should really kind of lean into that and embrace it to tell stories that other humans want to hear, because it's a very hard thing to do, but those that do it well absolutely fly.
We say the word human so much, it makes us sound like we're like robot masters from the future, like humans, what do humans? I've got I agree with all of those things. So they're kind of I think the positive ones. I worry slightly about, there's kind of a big split in what people are doing. So there tends to be like the cheaper, fast fail, get out on YouTube personal projects that, out of every, I don't know, say this is completely made up. Out of every 200 things, 199 of them will fail, and one person will make a bit of money out of one thing. And then there's a huge void at the moment then to like the Marvel films, which are still costing like 100 and whatever billion dollars. And in between the two things, there's kind of like this big void. Now, some of the smaller animation projects, films Adam was talking about, they could come in and maybe fill some of that. Some of the high-end Netflix series, on which there are less and less these days, may come in and fill some of that. But in general, it's like a two-tier system at the moment. And I think how we can transition people from fast fail in the bedroom animating to high-end feature films, Pixar, Disney, I think that's going to take some sort of working out. Which is, I'm sure we will work it out, but I just think that's a slight concern of mine at the moment.
I'm sure you will work it as well. And just to sort of say, we've reached the end now, and thank you so much for such a wide range of answers and enough to chew on there for the audience. And we look forward to whatever happens next with AI, with technology, with business, animation business, and with Blue Zoo. So Ollie, Tom, Adam, thanks so much for your time. Look forward to seeing you again.
Thanks.
No worries.
Cheers.
Thank you.
Bye.